Story number 1. The eerie light on the bridge. I still wake up in the dead of night. The memory of that night on Cedar Creek Bridge in West Virginia lingering like a persistent shadow in my mind. It was supposed to be just another routine patrol. Another stretch of highway to cover in my years as a police officer. But that night changed everything, blurring the lines between reality and the supernatural in ways I could never have imagined. Cedar Creek Bridge had always been a landmark in our small town of Ravenswood, built in the late 1920s. It spanned the rushing waters of Cedar Creek, connecting the east and west sides of the county. The bridge was sturdy, its steel beams glinting under the moonlight, a testament to the engineering marvels of its time. But beneath its grand exterior lay a darker history, one whispered about in hushed tones among the locals. The legend spoke of Eleanor Whitaker, a young woman who had tragically lost her life on that very bridge in 1935. According to the tales, Eleanor had been wrongfully accused of theft and thrown onto the tracks, meeting a gruesome end beneath the cold gaze of the bridge's iron beams. Her spirit, they said, never left, forever haunting the bridge with a restless anger and sorrow that manifested as a mysterious green light hovering above the water. I had always dismissed these stories as mere folklore, tales spun to add an air of mystery to our quiet town. But that night, as I drove my cruiser under Cedar Creek Bridge, I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew. It was a chilly October evening, the kind where the air bites at your skin and the leaves crunch underfoot. I had just finished my shift at the Ravenswood Police Department and decided to take a short drive to clear my head. The moon was full, casting an ethereal glow over the landscape, and the stars twinkled like distant beacons in the vast expanse of the night sky. As I approached Cedar Creek Bridge, the road stretched out before me, illuminated by the steady beam of my headlights. The bridge stood silent, its presence both comforting and eerie under the moonlight. I slowed down, appreciating the serene beauty of the scene, when suddenly, a flicker of green caught my eye. At first, I thought it was just a reflection, a trick of the light or perhaps the glare of a passing car. But as I focused my gaze, the green light became more defined, hovering steadily above the water below. My heart began to race, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up as a sense of unease settled over me. I pulled over to the side of the road, parking my cruiser and stepping out into the crisp night air. The green light pulsated softly, casting an otherworldly glow on the surrounding area. I approached cautiously, flashlight in hand, my footsteps silent on the gravel path that led to the bridge's edge. As I reached the railing, the green light seemed to respond, growing brighter and more intense. The water below shimmered with its reflection, creating ripples that spread out in concentric circles. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. This was the legend, the ghostly manifestation of Eleanor Whitaker's sorrow and rage. "Is someone there?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. The light flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw a faint outline of a woman standing beneath the bridge, her form translucent and ethereal. My breath caught in my throat as I realized the truth of the local legend. Eleanor's spirit was real, her presence undeniable in the stillness of the night. I reached out a hand, my flashlight beam sweeping over the dark waters. But there was no response. The figure beneath the bridge had vanished, leaving only the lingering glow of the green light. My mind raced with questions. Why was the light here tonight? Was there something unfinished in Eleanor's story that needed to be resolved? Determined to find answers, I decided to investigate further. I returned to my cruiser, pulling out my phone to call dispatch and report the unusual phenomenon. As I spoke, the green light began to intensify, pulsating in time with my racing heart. "Officer Harris, you there?" My partner, Officer Daniels, replied, his voice tinged with concern. "What's going on?" "I just saw something on Cedar Creek Bridge, a green light hovering over the water. I'm gonna check it out," I explained, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at me. "Be careful," Daniels cautioned. "We don't know what's causing it." I nodded, ending the call and turning back to face the bridge. As I stepped out of the cruiser, the green light seemed to react, swirling and changing shape in a mesmerizing display. The air grew colder, the mist from the creek rising in ghostly tendrils that enveloped the bridge. I approached the edge, the flashlight in my hand casting a narrow beam of light over the water. The green light danced on the surface, creating patterns that resembled the flicker of flames or the shimmer of a mirage. Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply, my breath visible in the icy air, and the green light began to form distinct shapes, faces contorted in anger and sorrow, their eyes hollow and pleading. "Eleanor," I whispered, my voice trembling. "What do you want?" The shapes in the light began to coalesce, forming the semblance of a woman standing beneath the bridge. Her eyes met mine through the glow, and I felt a surge of empathy and fear wash over me. The legend had come to life, and I was now face to face with the restless spirit of Eleanor Whitaker. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized the depth of her pain. "I'm sorry for what happened to you," I said softly. "Is there something I can do to help?" The green light flickered, and the image of Eleanor began to dissolve, her form fading into the mist as the light dimmed. "Find the truth," her voice echoed in my mind, a haunting plea that resonated with the sorrow of her untimely death. Determined to honor her request, I decided to delve deeper into the history of Cedar Creek Bridge and the circumstances surrounding Eleanor's death. I spent weeks researching old newspaper archives, interviewing longtime residents, and piecing together the fragmented details of her tragic story. What I discovered was a tale of injustice and corruption. Eleanor had been a beloved member of the community, known for her kindness and generosity, but beneath the surface, a web of deceit had been spun by those in power, leading to her wrongful accusation and brutal execution. Her death had been covered up, the truth buried alongside her remains beneath the very bridge that now served as her eternal prison. Armed with this knowledge, I felt a sense of purpose drive me back to Cedar Creek Bridge. I couldn't let Eleanor's spirit remain trapped in a cycle of pain and revenge. On the anniversary of her death, I returned to the bridge, the green light once again hovering over the water, a reminder of the unfinished business that bound her to this world. This time, I approached with a different intent, compassion and determination to bring justice to Eleanor's memory. I spoke to her spirit, recounting the truth of her story and acknowledging the pain she had endured. The green light responded, its glow intensifying as if recognizing my efforts to set her free. As I continued to speak, the green light began to fade, the mist swirling around the bridge dissipating into the night. The air felt lighter, the oppressive presence lifting as Eleanor's spirit found the closure it so desperately needed. A final burst of green light illuminated the water, a silent thank you before it vanished completely, leaving behind a sense of peace that had eluded the bridge for decades. Driving away from Cedar Creek Bridge, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment and relief. Eleanor's spirit was finally at rest, her tragic story brought to light and her name cleared of the false accusations that had condemned her. The bridge, once a symbol of sorrow and injustice, now stood as a monument to truth and redemption. Years have passed since that pivotal night, but the memory of the green light on Cedar Creek Bridge remains a testament to the enduring power of compassion and the importance of seeking justice for those who cannot speak for themselves. I continue my patrols with a deeper respect for the legends and the spirits that inhabit our world, knowing that sometimes the most profound connections are forged in the most unexpected encounters. Whenever I pass by Cedar Creek Bridge, especially on quiet, moonlit nights, I can't help but glance towards the water. Reflecting on the night I helped a restless spirit find peace. It's a story I share with reverence, a reminder that beneath the surface of our everyday lives lie untold stories of pain, loss, and the enduring quest for justice. And as long as the stars shine above the West Virginia sky, the legacy of Eleanor Whitaker lives on, a beacon of hope amidst the shadows of the past. Story number 2. Hotel Room 1046. I still wake up in the dead of night, the memory of that chilling case in Kansas City lingering like a persistent shadow. It was 1935, a time when jazz filled the air and the streets buzzed with the promise of the American dream. As a young detective with the Kansas City Police Department, I thought I had seen it all. But nothing could have prepared me for the horrors that awaited in the walls of Hotel Grandview, specifically in room 1046. The call came in just past midnight. A frantic voice on the other end reported screams and strange noises emanating from the hotel. Room 1046 had been the scene of an unsolved mystery years prior, a case that had haunted the department for decades. The victim, Eleanor Hartman, a wealthy socialite, had been found dead in her locked room with no signs of forced entry. The only clue left behind was the lingering echo of a mysterious voice conversing with her moments before her demise. I arrived at the Hotel Grandview, its grand facade illuminated by the flickering gas lamps that lined the street. The hotel was a relic of opulence, with marble pillars and ornate balconies that spoke of a bygone era. As I approached the entrance, the heavy wooden doors creaked open, revealing a dimly lit lobby adorned with rich tapestries and antique furnishings. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and lingering smoke from the roaring fireplace. Detective Harris greeted the hotel manager, Mr. Thompson, his face pale and eyes wide with worry. "Thank you for coming so quickly," I nodded, pulling out my notepad and flashlight. "Show me the room." Mr. Thompson led me through the labyrinthine corridors, his footsteps echoing softly against the polished floors. We passed through ornate lounges and grand ballrooms, each step bringing me closer to the heart of the hotel's dark history. Finally, we arrived at the end of a long hallway, the number 1046 hanging above a heavy oak door. The room was immaculate, untouched by time. Heavy velvet drapes covered the large windows, and a chandelier hung precariously from the ceiling, its crystals glinting ominously in the dim light. I pushed the door open, the hinges groaning in protest, and stepped inside. Eleanor Hartman's body lay sprawled across the Persian rug, her elegant gown stained with dark crimson. There were no signs of struggle, no bloodstains on the furniture, and no fingerprints to be found. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the haunting memory of her final moments. I approached the body, my flashlight casting long shadows on the walls. "Any witnesses?" I asked Mr. Thompson. He shook his head. No one heard anything unusual this time. The previous incidents were similar screams, whispers, but no one saw anything. I glanced around the room, noting the locked windows and the sturdy door. "And the phone?" Mr. Thompson gestured to the old rotary phone on the nightstand. "It's been disconnected for years. No one uses it anymore." I knelt beside Eleanor, examining her lifeless form. "Why is this room always such a mystery?" I mused aloud. No signs of entry, no evidence left behind. It's like the room itself is hiding something. As I pondered the enigma, a chill ran down my spine. The temperature in the room seemed to drop, the air growing colder despite the warmth of the fireplace downstairs. I felt a presence, an invisible force that pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. "Detective, are you all right?" Mr. Thompson's voice broke the silence. I nodded, trying to steady my racing heart. "Yeah, just something doesn't feel right here." Suddenly, I heard it, a faint whisper, almost imperceptible, coming from the far corner of the room. I turned my flashlight towards the source, my eyes straining to make out any movement. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Thompson shook his head, his face etched with fear. "I didn't hear anything. Maybe it's just the wind." But I knew better. The voice was too clear, too deliberate to be mere wind. I stood up, my senses on high alert, and began to investigate the room more thoroughly. My flashlight swept across the walls, landing on a large mirror hanging above the mantelpiece. As I approached the mirror, the temperature plummeted further, my breath visible in the icy air. The room seemed to distort around me, the reflection in the mirror warping and twisting in unnatural ways. I reached out, touching the cool glass, and felt a surge of energy pass through me. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. "Is someone there?" The whisper returned, louder this time, echoing off the walls like a ghostly melody. "Leave, now." I recoiled, pulling my hand away from the mirror. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice cracking with fear and frustration. The reflection in the mirror began to change, the image of Eleanor's face morphing into that of a man, his eyes hollow, his expression twisted in anguish and rage. "Why did you take her?" the apparition demanded, the voice no longer a whisper but a scream that reverberated through the room. I took a step back, my mind racing to comprehend the apparition before me. "I didn't take anyone," I replied, trying to maintain composure. "I'm just trying to understand what happened here." The man's figure began to dissolve, his form flickering like a faulty projection. "She deserves justice," he hissed, the anger in his voice palpable. "You must uncover the truth." Before I could respond, the room plunged into darkness, the only light emanating from the ghostly figure in the mirror. I fumbled for my flashlight, clicking it on and off in a desperate attempt to break the hold of the apparition. "Detective, we need to leave," Mr. Thompson urged, his voice shaking. I nodded, my resolve hardening. "You're right. Let's get out of here." As we turned to leave, the door slammed shut, the sound echoing through the room like a gunshot. Panic surged through me as I reached for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers and screams intensified, surrounding us in a cacophony of torment and sorrow. "Help us!" The voices melded into one, their plea echoing in my mind. "Find the truth!" I slammed my fists against the door, trying to force it open, but it remained firmly closed. The oppressive presence in the room seemed to grow stronger, the air thick with the weight of unresolved pain and vengeance. "Detective, what do we do?" Mr. Thompson asked, his voice barely audible over the chaos. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "We need to understand what happened to Eleanor. Maybe that's the key to breaking whatever hold this place has on us." Summoning all my courage, I began to retrace Eleanor's last known movements within the room, searching for any overlooked clue or hidden compartment. My flashlight illuminated every nook and cranny, every shadow holding the potential for discovery. In the corner of the room, hidden behind a stack of old newspapers, I found a small, leather-bound journal. My hands shook as I opened it, the pages yellowed and brittle with age. The entries were penned in Eleanor's elegant handwriting, detailing her life in the hotel, her loneliness, and her growing fear of an unseen presence that haunted her every night. One entry stood out, dated just days before her death. "There's something in room 1046. I can hear it speaking to me, urging me to uncover its secrets. I feel like I'm being watched, like someone's eyes are always on me. I must find out what's happening before it's too late." As I read the entry, the temperature in the room began to rise, the oppressive cold giving way to an unsettling warmth. The whispering voices quieted, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed down on us. "Detective," Mr. Thompson said softly, "what does it mean?" I closed the journal, a sense of clarity washing over me. Eleanor was being haunted, but not by spirits of the past. It was something else, something that thrived on fear and secrets. The door suddenly swung open, the sound breaking the silence and sending us stumbling back. The room was bathed in the first light of dawn, the ghostly apparitions fading with the morning sun. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a sense of calm and release. "We need to report this," I said, my voice steady despite the night's horrors. "There's more to this case than meets the eye." Back at the station, I filed my report, detailing the supernatural occurrences and the mysterious journal. The case of room 1046 became one of the most perplexing and haunting investigations of my career, a testament to the unseen forces that linger in the shadows of our world. Months later, the The story of Eleanor Hartman's tragic demise and the ghostly apparitions in Hotel Grandview became a local legend. A cautionary tale about the dangers of uncovering secrets best left buried. I continued my work with a deeper respect for the mysteries that lie beyond our understanding, knowing that some truths are more terrifying than fiction. Whenever I pass by the Hotel Grandview, now renovated and bustling with guests unaware of its dark past, I can't help but glance towards room 1046. The whispers of the past linger in the air, a haunting reminder that the line between the living and the dead is thinner than we dare to believe. And as long as that room stands, so too will the shadows of Eleanor Hartman, forever seeking justice and peace in the endless corridors of time. Story number 3. Shadows of Redemption. I still wake up in the dead of night, my heart pounding and drenched in sweat, haunted by the memory of that spectral encounter in the old Baton Rouge penitentiary. It was supposed to be just another shift, another routine patrol in a place rich with history and echoes of the past. Instead, it became a nightmarish ordeal that blurred the lines between reality and the supernatural, leaving me questioning everything I thought I knew about the world. The Baton Rouge Penitentiary, now a decommissioned facility, stood as a relic of a bygone era. Its imposing stone facade and iron-barred windows were a stark contrast to the modernity that had crept into the surrounding neighborhoods. Legends of the prison's dark past circulated among locals, stories of corruption, brutality, and the restless spirits of those who never found peace within its walls. As a police officer stationed nearby, I was no stranger to these tales, but I never believed them until that fateful night. It was late October, the air crisp with the first hints of winter, and the days were growing shorter. My shift had ended earlier than usual, granting me a rare evening to unwind. Deciding to take advantage of the quiet, I drove past the penitentiary, admiring the moonlight reflecting off its cold, unyielding surface. The place had always intrigued me, a monument to human suffering and resilience, but also a symbol of fear that kept many at bay. Around midnight, as I was about to head home, my radio crackled to life. "Officer Davis, we've got a report of strange noises coming from the old penitentiary. Possible trespasser. Proceed with caution." My curiosity piqued. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, making my way back to the station to gather more information. The dispatcher's voice was tense. "Multiple witnesses have heard screams and shouts coming from within. No one has seen anyone near the perimeter." I glanced at my watch. It was almost midnight again. Deciding to investigate, I drove towards the penitentiary, the road winding through dense trees that seemed to close in around me. The facility loomed ahead, its gates rusted and ajar, inviting yet foreboding. I parked my cruiser a safe distance away, the gravel crunching under my boots as I approached cautiously. The air was unnaturally still, the only sounds being the distant hoot of an owl and the rustling of leaves. I reached the main entrance, the heavy doors creaking ominously as I pushed them open. The interior was cloaked in darkness, the only illumination coming from my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The scent of damp stone and decay filled my nostrils, a tangible reminder of the prison's grim history. I moved silently through the corridors, each step echoing off the bare walls. The building felt alive, as if the shadows themselves were watching my every move. My flashlight flickered intermittently, casting eerie patterns that danced on the walls. I followed the sounds of distant screams, my heart racing with a mix of fear and determination. As I turned a corner, the temperature seemed to drop abruptly, my breath visible in the cold air. The screams grew louder, more desperate, echoing through the empty halls. I reached a large cell block, the iron bars gleaming under the weak light of my flashlight. The door to the central corridor stood wide open, inviting me into its depths. Steeling myself, I stepped inside, the sound of my footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust that covered the floor. The corridor stretched out before me, lined with cells that held secrets of their own. I followed the screams to the end of the hall, where an old, rusted intercom system lay abandoned. The screams seemed to emanate from it, filling the space with their haunting echoes. Suddenly, a shadow darted across the corridor, too swift and deliberate to be human. My heart skipped a beat as I swung my flashlight towards the movement. But there was nothing there, only the empty corridor and the lingering sense of dread. I shook my head, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. As I turned back towards the intercom, the temperature plummeted further, and the air grew thick with an oppressive presence. The screams intensified, blending with the whispers of forgotten souls. I felt a chill run down my spine, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. It was then that I saw him, a figure standing in the shadows, his form barely discernible but undeniably human. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice trembling despite my efforts to stay calm. The figure remained silent, his presence overwhelming, the air around him thick with sorrow and rage. He took a step forward, and I could see the outline of his face, hollow eyes staring into nothingness, a permanent expression of anguish etched into his features. My flashlight flickered again, and in that brief moment of darkness, he vanished. Panic surged through me as I tried to make sense of what I had just witnessed. My mind raced with the legends I had heard, the stories of the restless spirits that lingered within the penitentiary's walls. I knew I had to leave, but the oppressive atmosphere held me in place, making it difficult to move. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life, the screams returning with renewed intensity. "Leave now." I bolted towards the exit, my adrenaline fueling each desperate step. The corridors seemed to stretch endlessly, the walls closing in around me as the whispers of the past swirled around me. I could feel the presence of the spirits pressing in, their sorrow and anger intertwining with my fear. As I reached the main entrance, the doors swung open with a force that sent me sprawling to the ground. I scrambled to my feet, the cold night air hitting me like a wave. Without looking back, I ran towards my cruiser, the screams echoing in my ears. The oppressive feeling lifted as I sped away, the penitentiary shrinking into the distance, its dark secrets remaining locked within its walls. Back at the station, I recounted the experience to my fellow officers, their skepticism mirroring my own initial disbelief. "It's probably just the wind and the old building settling," one of them suggested, trying to rationalize the inexplicable. But deep down, I knew what I had seen was real, something beyond our understanding that refused to be dismissed. The Baton Rouge Penitentiary had revealed its dark side, a glimpse into the tortured souls that still roamed its halls, forever trapped in their eternal suffering. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved into the prison's history, uncovering tales of brutality and injustice that had plagued the facility for decades. The most infamous was the story of James "Blackjack" Malone, a notorious criminal known for his cunning and cruelty. Malone had been executed within those very walls, his death a grim spectacle that had left a lasting scar on the community. Legends spoke of Malone's vengeful spirit, forever seeking retribution for the wrongs he believed were done to him. Reports of strange noises, apparitions, and unexplained phenomena had been common since his execution. But nothing had ever been substantiated until that night. Months passed, and the memory of that encounter lingered, a haunting reminder of the thin veil between our world and the supernatural. I continued my patrols with a heightened sense of awareness, every shadow and flicker of light reminding me of the spirits that dwelled within the old penitentiary. One evening, driven by a mix of duty and curiosity, I returned to the site, determined to document any further occurrences. Armed with my flashlight and a voice recorder, I made my way through the gates, the penitentiary standing silent and foreboding against the night sky. I began my search, methodically exploring the corridors and cells, my equipment capturing every sound and movement. Hours passed with no sign of the supernatural, the silence of the night providing no clues. Just as I was about to call it a night, a familiar scream pierced the darkness, sending chills down my spine. Following the sound, I found myself back at the central corridor, the intercom system once again crackling to life with the anguished cries. "Leave now." I approached cautiously, the presence of Malone's spirit growing stronger with each step. Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply, and the air thickened with an oppressive force. The shadowy figure reappeared, his hollow eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that left me breathless. "This ends now," I declared, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "You won't torment anyone else." The spirit let out a guttural growl, the room shaking with the force of his anger. Objects began to move on their own, the remnants of the past swirling around me in a chaotic dance. The intercom screamed once more, the voices of the tortured souls merging into a cacophony of despair. Desperation fueled my actions as I tried to reason with Malone's spirit. "I understand your pain, but holding on to anger and vengeance won't bring you peace. Let go." For a moment, the tension hung in the air, the spirit's wrath pausing as if considering my words. Slowly, the room began to calm, the chaotic energy dissipating into a serene stillness. The intercom fell silent, the oppressive presence lifting as the spirits found solace in my acknowledgement of their suffering. Malone's spirit began to fade, his form becoming translucent before dissolving into the night. A profound sense of relief washed over me, the haunting screams and whispers finally silenced. The Baton Rouge Penitentiary stood silent once more, its dark legacy slowly fading into the shadows of the past. Driving away from the site, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment and peace. I had faced the darkness head-on, offering compassion and understanding to the tortured souls trapped within the penitentiary's walls. The experience left an indelible mark on my soul, a reminder of the power of empathy and the importance of acknowledging the pain that lingers beyond the veil of death. Years have passed since that pivotal night, but the memory of the shadows of redemption at Baton Rouge Penitentiary remains vivid. I continue my duties with a newfound respect for the unseen forces that shape our world, knowing that some battles are fought not with strength, but with compassion and understanding. Whenever I drive past the old penitentiary, its stone walls standing tall against the night, I can't help but feel a sense of peace emanating from within. The spirits have found their rest, their stories finally heard and acknowledged. And as long as those walls stand, the legacy of redemption and the power of empathy will continue to echo through the corridors of time, a testament to the enduring spirit of those who seek peace beyond the shadows. Story number 4. Man on the highway. I still wake up in the dead of night, the memory of that encounter on Route 66 etched into my mind like the endless miles stretching before me. As a patrol officer in Arizona, I've spent countless nights driving the desolate stretches of our vast desert highways, the hum of my cruiser and the distant howl of coyotes my only companions. But nothing prepared me for the night I met the man who vanished into the darkness. It was mid-October, the air crisp and the desert bathed in the silvery glow of a full moon. I had just finished my shift at the small town of Saguaro Ridge, a place where the desert meets the mountains, creating a stark and unforgiving landscape. The town was quiet, the streets empty save for a few scattered vehicles and the occasional late-night wanderer seeking solace under the star-studded sky. I was driving north on Route 66, the highway stretching out before me like a ribbon of solitude. My cruiser's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the rugged terrain and the distant silhouettes of saguaros standing sentinel against the night. The radio was off, giving me a rare moment of peace to collect my thoughts after a long week. Around 2:37 a.m., as I passed the old Miller's gas station, a relic from a bygone era, I noticed a figure standing at the side of the road. At first, I thought it was a hitchhiker or someone in distress, but as I drew closer, the image became more unsettling. The man was dressed in a tattered suit, his clothes seemingly out of place in the harsh desert environment. His skin was unnaturally pale, almost luminescent under the moonlight, and his eyes stared blankly into the void. Curiosity piqued. I slowed down and activated my sirens. The piercing wail echoed through the stillness, cutting through the night like a blade. The man didn't flinch or move. He simply stood there, staring ahead as if waiting for something or someone. I parked my cruiser a safe distance away, the engine idling quietly as I stepped out into the cold night air. The desert was eerily silent, the only sounds being the soft rustle of the wind through the cacti and the distant call of an owl. I approached the man cautiously, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, revealing more details of his unsettling appearance. "Hello," I called out, my voice steady despite the unease creeping up my spine. "Are you all right? Do you need help?" He didn't respond. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, his expression still blank. I took another step forward, feeling a chill run down my back. There was something off about him, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. "Sir, can you tell me your name?" I asked, hoping for some semblance of normalcy in this strange encounter. Still nothing. His silence was deafening, the lack of response more unsettling than any verbal reply could have been. I reached out a hand, attempting to offer assistance, but as my fingers brushed his arm, he began to shimmer and distort, his form becoming translucent. My heart raced as I watched in disbelief. He was fading before my eyes, dissolving into the night like mist under the morning sun. I stumbled back, clutching my chest as panic surged through me. The man was gone, leaving behind nothing but the faint scent of smoke and the lingering echo of his presence. Shaken, I returned to my cruiser, my hands trembling as I started the engine. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me, the shadows of the desert seeming to twist and writhe in my peripheral vision. The next morning, the incident weighed heavily on my mind. I reported the encounter to my supervisor, Officer Daniels, who listened with a furrowed brow. "You saw a ghostly apparition, didn't you?" he asked, his tone a mix of skepticism and concern. I nodded, recounting the details as best as I could. Daniels sighed, rubbing his temples. "There have been a few reports like yours over the years. People seeing unexplained figures on these roads. Some say it's the spirit of a man who lost his way in the desert. Others believe it's something more sinister. Determined to find answers, I began researching the history of Route 66 and the surrounding areas. That's when I stumbled upon the story of Henry Miller, a businessman who owned the gas station where I first encountered the man. In 1978, Henry had mysteriously disappeared without a trace, leaving behind a burning question that had never been answered. His car was found abandoned on the highway, the engine still warm, but there was no sign of Henry himself. The case went cold, the desert swallowing his fate into its vast, unforgiving embrace. Over the following weeks, I heard whispers among my colleagues about the highway phantom, a spectral figure said to roam the desert roads, eternally searching for something lost. Some dismissed it as folklore, a way to explain the desert's eerie silence and the strange occurrences that sometimes plagued late-night travelers. But my encounter with the man at Miller's gas station made me question everything I thought I knew about the thin line between the living and the dead. One night, exactly a month after the initial encounter, I received another call. "Officer Harris, we have another report from Elm Street. Caller says they saw a man walking along the highway at midnight. He looks distressed." The timing was uncanny, the memory of the ghostly figure fresh in my mind. I grabbed my gear and headed out, the desert night enveloping me once more. As I drove along Elm Street, the darkness seemed to press in, the stars obscured by thick clouds that rolled ominously overhead. At precisely midnight, just as I reached the mile marker where the old Miller's gas station once stood, I saw him again, a man walking along the side of the road, his figure barely discernible against the inky blackness. I pulled over, activating my sirens to signal my presence. The man stopped, turning to face me with the same blank expression. "Sir, are you okay? Do you need assistance?" I called out, my voice a mixture of duty and fear. Once more, he didn't respond. Instead, he began to walk towards me, his movements slow and deliberate. I stepped out of the cruiser, flashlight in hand, determined to get some answers. As I approached, the air grew colder, the desert night feeling more oppressive than before. "Please, let me help you," I said, extending my hand. But as I reached out, the man's form began to shimmer and waver, his features blurring into nothingness. In an instant, he vanished, leaving behind an unsettling silence that pressed down on me like a heavy blanket. I stood there for a moment, heart pounding, trying to process what I had just witnessed. The desert was silent once more, the only sound my own heavy breathing. As I returned to my cruiser, I couldn't help but feel that something had changed, an unseen presence lingering in the shadows, watching my every move. Determined to uncover the truth, I continued my patrols with renewed purpose, keeping an eye out for any further encounters. The stories of my colleagues mirrored my own experiences, each report adding another layer to the mystery of the highway phantom. But no matter how many times I saw him, or how many times others did, the answers remained elusive. One evening, as I sat in my cruiser reviewing the reports, a thought struck me. What if the highway phantom wasn't just a restless spirit, but something else entirely, an entity bound to the desert, feeding off the fears and memories of those who dared to roam its endless roads? The more I pondered it, the more the pieces began to fit together. The man's disappearance, the unexplained phenomena, the haunting presence that seemed to follow me, it all pointed to something beyond our understanding, a force that thrived in the isolation and vastness of the desert. As the nights grew longer and the desert colder, I found myself drawn deeper into the mystery, my quest for answers becoming an obsession. I reached out to local historians, paranormal investigators, and even spiritual leaders, seeking any clue that could shed light on the true nature of the highway phantom. Each conversation only deepened the enigma, with theories ranging from tragic spirits seeking closure to ancient desert guardians protecting sacred lands. But none of the explanations satisfied the chilling reality I had experienced firsthand. One particularly stormy night, as lightning split the sky and rain lashed against my cruiser's windshield, I received a call that would change everything. "Officer Harris, we have a situation at the Miller's gas station. Multiple reports of strange noises and sightings. Proceed with caution." Heart racing, I navigated through the torrential downpour, the old gas station now a silhouette against the raging storm. As I approached, the wind howled through the broken windows, and the remnants of the past seemed to come alive with the fury of the storm. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the scent of rain and decay mingling in the oppressive atmosphere. I turned on my flashlight, its beam piercing the darkness, revealing the charred remains of what was once a bustling gas station. But something was different. Shadows danced unnaturally across the walls, and the temperature dropped further, the chill seeping into my bones. "Hello? Is anyone here?" I called out, my voice wavering with a mix of duty and fear. A sudden, deafening silence followed, the storm outside momentarily pausing as if holding its breath. Then, out of the darkness, the man appeared once more, his figure more defined yet still ethereal. His eyes bore into mine, a silent plea and an unspoken sorrow emanating from his very being. "This isn't right," I whispered, taking a cautious step forward. "What do you want?" The man began to speak, his voice a haunting echo that seemed to reverberate through the very walls. "Lost. Can't find peace. Help us." Tears welled up in my eyes as the weight of his words sank in. The highway phantom wasn't just a ghostly figure. He was a symbol of the lost souls trapped in the desert's unforgiving embrace, victims of tragedies long forgotten but never truly gone. Determined to help, I reached out once more, my hand trembling as I placed it gently on his shoulder. "I'm here to help you find peace. Tell me what I need to do." The man's form began to shimmer, the storm around us intensifying as if acknowledging my offer. "Remember, honor, rest." With those final words, he began to fade, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as the storm outside began to calm. The silence returned, but this time it was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos that had preceded it. As I stood there, the last remnants of the man dissolved into the night, leaving behind a sense of closure that had eluded both him and me for so long. The highway was silent once more, the desert still and serene under the now clear sky. Driving back to Saguaro Ridge, I felt a profound sense of relief and purpose. The highway phantom had found peace, and in helping him, I had uncovered a truth that transcended the boundaries of our understanding. The desert, vast and unforgiving, held secrets that whispered through the night, tales of loss and redemption etched into the very fabric of its endless sands. Years have passed since that fateful night, but the memory of the highway phantom remains a haunting reminder of the thin veil between our world and the unknown. I continue my patrols with a deeper respect for the mysteries that lie within the desert, knowing that some roads lead to places where the past and present intertwine in ways that defy explanation. Whenever I drive along Route 66, especially under the light of a full moon, I can't help but glance to the side of the road, half expecting to see the familiar figure standing there, watching over the desert with eyes that hold the sorrow of 1,000 untold stories. It serves as a solemn reminder that the highways we traverse are not just pathways through space, but journeys through time and the unseen forces that shape our existence. And so, I share my story not just as a warning, but as a tribute to the lost souls who wander the desert roads, their spirits forever intertwined with the night. The man on the highway was more than a phantom. He was a guardian of the desert secrets, a reminder that some mysteries are best left undisturbed, their truths hidden within the shadows of the vast and silent sands. Story number 5. Midnight knock. I still wake up in the dead of night, the memory of that eerie knock echoing in my mind like a persistent drumbeat. It was supposed to be just another night on patrol, another shift in the quiet suburbs of Texas. But what transpired that midnight altered everything, leaving me questioning the very fabric of reality and the unseen forces that lurk in the shadows. It was late October, the air crisp with the onset of winter, and the streets were cloaked in a serene stillness typical of suburban neighborhoods. My name is Officer David Harris, and I've been patrolling the outskirts of Dallas for over a decade. Most nights were uneventful, the monotony of routine patrols broken only by occasional calls, disturbances, minor accidents, or the odd noise complaint. But this night was different. I was stationed at the edge of Elmwood Drive, a quiet cul-de-sac lined with neatly trimmed hedges and modest homes. My cruiser was parked under the glow of a street lamp, its beam casting long shadows that danced with the slight breeze. I had settled into the comfort of the driver's seat, enjoying the rare peace that comes with a slow night. Around 2:17 a.m., my radio crackled to life. Officer Harris, we have a call from the residents at 34 Elmwood Drive. Caller reports hearing loud knocking on the front door. No one seen or heard. I sighed softly, pulling out my notepad to jot down the details. Copy that. Dispatch. I'm on my way. As I approached the house, the only sound was the rhythmic tapping of my boots against the pavement. The house stood silent, its windows dark and uninviting. The front door was slightly ajar, an unusual sight that immediately set off alarm bells in my mind. I parked a respectful distance away, grabbing my flashlight from the glove compartment before making my way up the walkway. "Hello," I called out, my voice steady despite the unease creeping up my spine. No response. I took a cautious step forward, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness to illuminate the porch. The knocking had ceased, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. I reached out to push the door open further, but it swung closed on its own with a force that sent a shiver down my spine. "Is anyone there?" I repeated, more urgently this time. Nothing. I fumbled with my flashlight, turning it on and off, the flickering light casting strange shadows that seemed to dance just beyond my sight. My heart pounded in my chest, the adrenaline sharpening my senses. I took a deep breath, telling myself it was probably just a prank or a resident experiencing a nightmare. I decided to search the house, my footsteps echoing through the empty halls. As I moved from room to room, the house felt colder, the air thick with an unspoken tension. Each room was meticulously kept. No signs of recent activity or disturbance. It was as if the house was a ghost, frozen in time. Reaching the living room, I noticed something odd, a dusty, old rotary phone sitting on the coffee table. It was unplugged, its receiver resting loosely, yet I could swear I heard faint echoes of ringing. Long after I had turned off the flashlight, I approached cautiously, my flashlight revealing the intricate patterns carved into the wood, a remnant of a bygone era. Suddenly, the knocking resumed, louder this time, echoing from the front door. My blood ran cold as I spun around, the flashlight illuminating the doorway once more. There was no one there, yet the sound persisted, relentless and unnerving. Someone's playing with us, I muttered under my breath, my mind racing with possibilities. Or something. I decided to set up my body camera, hoping to capture any unusual activity. As I fumbled with the device, the knocking intensified, a staccato rhythm that seemed to pulse with malevolent intent. My hands trembled slightly, the fear threatening to overtake my professionalism. Just then, a shadow darted across the hallway, too swift and unnatural to be human. I turned the flashlight towards it, but it vanished before I could get a clear view. My heart raced as I backed away, the oppressive atmosphere closing in around me. Okay, time to leave, I whispered, making my way back towards the front door. As I reached for the handle, the rotary phone began to ring again, the sound deafening in the quiet house. I froze, the urge to flee battling with the need to understand what was happening. Summoning every ounce of courage, I answered the call. 911. What's your emergency? Silence. Then, a faint whisper, barely audible over the ringing. Leave. Now. I pulled the receiver away, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The knocking reached a fever pitch, the sound blending with the ethereal whispers that filled the air. My mind raced, trying to rationalize the unexplainable. It was a simple house, devoid of any supernatural lore, or so I thought. I grabbed my flashlight and headed towards the front door, the knocking now morphing into a sinister rhythm that seemed to resonate with my very soul. As I pushed the door open, a blast of icy wind hit me, the temperature plummeting in an instant. The street lamp outside flickered, casting erratic shadows that danced like malevolent spirits. I stepped outside, the cold biting through my uniform, making me shiver. The knocking had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that pressed in on me from all sides. I glanced back at the house, its dark windows staring back like empty eyes, the door now firmly closed. Suddenly, my body camera began to malfunction, the screen flickering and distorting the surroundings. I tapped it, trying to reset the device, but it remained unresponsive. Panic set in as I realized I was alone, the house standing as a silent sentinel to the night's terrors. As I turned to leave, a figure materialized at the edge of my flashlight's beam, an apparition, pale and translucent, its eyes hollow and devoid of life. It reached out towards me, the gesture both pleading and menacing. My breath caught in my throat as I struggled to maintain composure. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice barely masking the fear. The figure remained silent, its presence overwhelming, the air around us thick with sorrow and anger. I took a step back, the apparition mirroring my movement, its eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that pierced through my very being. I turned and ran, my boots pounding against the pavement as I sped back to my cruiser. The engine roared to life, but the oppressive feeling of being watched lingered, clinging to me like a second skin. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the ghostly figure following me. But there was nothing, just the empty street and the flickering street lamp. As I drove away, the house receded into the darkness, its secrets remaining locked within its walls. The rest of the night passed in a blur, the events replaying in my mind with relentless precision. I reported the incident, but the evidence was inconclusive. No recordings, no physical evidence, just my own harrowing experience. Weeks passed, but the memory of that night refused to fade. Strange occurrences began to follow me. Unexplained noises in my home, objects moving on their own, and the ever-present feeling of being watched. My body camera was returned to me, the footage blank except for the distorted night of the call to Elmwood Drive. I sought answers, delving into the history of the Whitaker house, uncovering tales of tragedy and loss. The Whitaker family had perished in a devastating fire years ago, their spirits rumored to haunt the house, forever trapped in their final moments. Skepticism among my peers made it difficult to share my story, the line between belief and disbelief blurring as the supernatural seemed to encroach upon my reality. Determined to understand, I returned to the house one last time, armed with new equipment and a resolve to uncover the truth. The night was colder, the moon hidden behind thick clouds that swallowed the light. As I approached, the house stood silent, its dark windows staring back like empty sockets. I stepped inside, the air heavy with the scent of smoke and despair. The knocking began anew, a rhythmic tapping that echoed through the halls. I followed the sound, navigating the charred remains of the living room, the flickering beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. In the corner, the apparition stood once more, its presence more defined yet still ethereal. "Leave," it whispered, the word vibrating through my very core. I hesitated, the weight of my fear battling with a deep-seated need for answers. "Why are you haunting this place?" I asked, my voice trembling. The figure began to move, gesturing towards the staircase. Reluctantly, I followed, ascending to the second floor where the screams had originated. The room was empty, the fireplace cold and lifeless, yet the oppressive atmosphere was undeniable. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, the knocking turning into a frenzied rhythm that mirrored my racing heart. The temperature plummeted, my breath visible in the icy air. Shadows twisted and danced around me, the spirits of the Whitaker family reliving their final moments of terror. "Help us!" The whispers coalesced into a chorus of despair, the voices overlapping in a haunting symphony. "Release us!" I felt a surge of empathy, the pain of their eternal suffering resonating within me. "What can I do to help you find peace?" pleaded, my resolve hardening. The room began to shift, the shadows forming into tangible forms that moved with purpose. The spirits surrounded me, their eyes pleading, their presence a constant reminder of the thin veil between life and death. I reached out, touching the edge of the room, feeling the coldness seep into my very soul. "You must remember us," the lead spirit intoned, her voice echoing with centuries of sorrow. "Remember our lives, our love, our loss." I nodded, understanding that acknowledgement was the key to their release. I remember your family, your tragedy. I'm sorry for what happened." As the words left my lips, the oppressive atmosphere began to lift, the spirit's forms fading into the light that now filled the room. The knocking ceased, replaced by a serene silence that spoke of peace and closure. The house no longer felt like a prison but a sanctuary for the restless souls to finally move on. I left the house that night with a profound sense of relief, the weight of the encounter lifting from my shoulders. The strange occurrences that had plagued me ceased, the feeling of being watched replaced by a comforting sense of calm. The Whitaker house stood silent once more, its haunted legacy finally laid to rest. Years have passed since that fateful night, but the memory of the midnight knock remains a stark reminder of the unseen forces that inhabit our world. I continue my patrols with a newfound respect for the mysteries that lie beyond our understanding. The line between reality and the supernatural forever blurred by my experience at Elmwood Drive. Whenever a storm rages outside, I can't help but think of the spirits I encountered, their whispers a solemn reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring power of empathy. The Whitaker house stands as a testament to the souls that seek peace, their stories etched into the very fabric of the night, waiting for someone to listen and remember. And so, I share my story not just as a cautionary tale but as a tribute to the lives lost and the spirits that linger. a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying encounters are those that challenge our perception of the world and our place within it. Story number 6. Call from the beyond. I still wake up in the dead of night, the memory of that eerie call from the abandoned house in Illinois haunting my every thought. It was supposed to be just another late-night shift, another routine call that would soon fade into the background of my career as a police officer. But what transpired that midnight call changed everything, leaving me questioning the very nature of reality and the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown. It was a chilly October night, the kind where the wind whispers secrets through the bare branches and the moon casts long, unsettling shadows across the deserted streets. I was patrolling the outskirts of our small town, a place where everyone knew each other, and nothing much ever happened. The tranquility of the night was both comforting and deceptive, masking the darkness that lurked just beyond the reach of our streetlights. My radio crackled to life, jolting me from my thoughts. "Dispatch. This is Officer Miller. We have a 911 call coming in from the old Whitaker place on Elm Street. Caller is reporting screams and strange noises coming from the house. The area is abandoned. No known residents." The Whitaker house had been empty for years, ever since the tragic fire that claimed the lives of the Whitaker family. The house stood as a grim reminder of that night. Its charred remains a testament to the fragility of life and the unforgiving nature of fate. Locals avoided it, especially after sundown, speaking in hushed tones about the horrors that once unfolded within its walls. "Copy that. Dispatch. I'm en route to Elm Street," I replied, grabbing my flashlight and holster. The thought of someone, or something, still lingering in that house sent a chill down my spine. But my duty outweighed any personal fears. As I drove through the winding roads, the house came into view, silhouetted against the darkened sky. Its once grand facade was now a shadow of its former self. Windows shattered and walls scarred by time and neglect. The overgrown yard and broken shutters gave it an air of desolation, a perfect setting for the night's unsettling events. Parking a safe distance away, I approached the house with caution. The night was eerily silent, the only sounds being the distant hoot of an owl and the crunch of dead leaves under my boots. My flashlight beam danced across the exterior, illuminating the twisted remnants of what once was a proud family home. I reached the front door, its wood warped and splintered from years of exposure to the elements. Taking a deep breath, I pushed it open, the hinges protesting loudly in the stillness. The interior was shrouded in darkness, the air thick with the scent of smoke and decay. I flicked on my flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom, revealing the remnants of the Whitaker family's life, burned furniture, scattered belongings, and the haunting void where life once thrived. "Hello? Is anyone here?" I called out, my voice echoing through the empty halls. The only response was the faint whisper of the wind and the distant dripping of water from a leaky roof. I moved cautiously through the house, every step bringing me closer to the source of the reported screams. The layout was disorienting, the charred walls and broken floors making it difficult to navigate. As I climbed the creaky staircase, the temperature seemed to drop, my breath visible in the cold air. Reaching the second floor, I followed the sound of muffled cries to a room at the end of the hallway. Pushing the door open, my flashlight revealed a scene straight out of a nightmare. The room was in ruins, the remnants of furniture twisted and broken. But what stood out most was the old telephone sitting on a dusty table, its rotary dial still intact despite the years of abandonment. I approached the phone, the screams now clearer, tinged with fear and desperation. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached out to pick it up, only to find it cold and unresponsive. Confusion washed over me. How could there be screams coming from a phone that wasn't connected to anything? Suddenly, the air grew thick with an oppressive presence, the shadows in the room shifting and contorting as if alive. The temperature plummeted further, my breath coming in quick. Shallow gasps. I felt a hand on my shoulder, icy cold and unyielding, causing me to spin around in terror. But there was nothing there, no one to see. Yet the feeling of being watched was undeniable. The screams intensified, now accompanied by the faint sound of laughter, echoing through the desolate room. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment, the room was bathed in an otherworldly glow before plunging back into darkness. What do you want? I stammered, trying to steady my voice despite the fear gripping me. The room seemed to breathe, the walls pulsating with an unseen energy. The telephone began to ring, its shrill tone cutting through the silence like a knife. Compelled by an inexplicable force, I reached out and lifted the receiver, the ringing growing louder, more insistent. "Help us!" a distorted voice pleaded, the words barely intelligible over the cacophony of screams and laughter. I tried to respond, but my voice was caught in my throat, the fear too overwhelming. The phone slipped from my grasp, shattering on the floor with a deafening crash. The room erupted in chaos, objects flying through the air as unseen forces tore through the house. I shielded my face, trying to protect myself from the invisible onslaught. But the feeling of dread only intensified. When I finally dared to look around, the room had transformed. The darkness was replaced by a blinding white light, the remnants of the house seemingly restored to their former glory. But something was horribly wrong. The once welcoming space now exuded a sinister aura, the air thick with malice. In the center of the room stood the ghostly figures of the Whitaker family, their faces twisted in eternal anguish, their eyes hollow, their expressions frozen in a moment of unspeakable horror. They reached out towards me, their fingers elongated and skeletal, the gesture both pleading and menacing. "Why are you here?" one of them hissed, the voice hollow and echoing. I took a step back, my mind racing for an explanation, any rational thought to dispel the nightmare unfolding before me. I received a call. Someone was screaming. The spirits began to move towards me, their movements fluid yet unnatural, gliding across the room with an eerie grace. The temperature dropped further, my skin prickling with goosebumps as the air grew heavy with sorrow and rage. "I didn't mean any harm," pleaded, my voice barely audible. "I'm here to help." Their expressions seemed to soften, the anger replaced by a profound sadness. "Help us find peace," another spirit whispered, her voice breaking. "Our lives were cut short by tragedy. We cannot move on." I felt a surge of empathy amidst the fear, the weight of their sorrow pressing down on me. "What can I do?" The spirits began to fade, their forms dissolving into the white light, leaving behind only the shattered remnants of the telephone. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a serene stillness that signified the end of their torment. Breathing heavily, I gathered myself and made my way back downstairs, the house now silent and still. The front door was wide open, the early morning light spilling into the darkness. As I stepped outside, the chill of the night lingered, the memory of the spirit's sorrow etched into my mind. Returning to the station, I recounted the night's events to my fellow officers, their skepticism mirroring my own initial disbelief. But the evidence was undeniable: the shattered phone, the transformed house, and the lingering sense of the supernatural. Days turned into weeks, and the story of my encounter at the Whitaker house spread throughout the department. Some dismissed it as a figment of my imagination, fueled by the stress of the job and the haunted reputation of the house. Others believed, their own experiences with the unexplained giving credence to my tale. Determined to find answers, I delved into the history of the Whitaker family, uncovering the tragic details of the fire that had claimed their lives. They had been a happy family, their lives cut short by a sudden and devastating blaze that left no survivors. The house had been declared unsafe, left to decay and become a relic of past sorrow. I reached out to a paranormal investigator, hoping to shed light on the supernatural forces at play. Together, we returned to the house, equipped with cameras and recording equipment, determined to capture evidence of the lingering spirits. During our investigation, the house seemed to resist our presence, objects moving on their own, doors slamming shut, and the temperature fluctuating unpredictably. We documented every anomaly, the spirit's presence becoming more palpable with each passing hour. These spirits are trapped, the investigator concluded after reviewing our findings. They relive their final moments, unable to find peace. They need closure. Inspired by their plight, I decided to help them in any way I could. We organized a memorial service, inviting the local community to honor the Whitaker family and acknowledge their suffering. We lit candles, shared stories of their lives, and offered prayers for their souls to find rest. As the ceremony concluded, a profound calm settled over the house. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a peaceful serenity that spoke of newfound tranquility. The spirits seemed to fade, their anguish finally released, leaving behind only the lingering memory of their presence. Driving away from the house, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. We had faced the unknown and emerged stronger, forever changed by the experience. The Whitaker house stood silent once more, no longer a beacon of horror but a monument to the enduring human spirit and the power of compassion to heal even the deepest wounds. Years have passed since that fateful night, but the memory of the call from the abandoned house remains a stark reminder of the thin veil between our world and the unknown. I often find myself reflecting on the experience, the lessons learned about empathy, respect, and the mysteries that lie beyond our understanding. Whenever a storm rages outside, I can't help but think of the Whitaker family's cries for peace, their spirits forever etched into the annals of the haunted house at Elm Street. It's a story I share with caution, knowing that not everyone would believe the depth of fear and respect that the supernatural commands. And as long as the whispers of the beyond linger in the night, the call from the other side will remain a haunting reminder of the unseen forces that watch over us, waiting for those brave enough to listen. Story number 7. Whispers from Amityville. I still wake up in the dead of night, drenched in sweat, the echoes of that night in Amityville haunting my every thought. It was supposed to be just another call, another night shift handling routine disturbances, but what unfolded at 112 Ocean Avenue etched itself into my mind. A grim reminder that some places hold secrets best left undisturbed. It was late October, the air crisp with the first whispers of winter. The infamous Amityville house, a beacon of horror lore, stood ominously against the darkening sky. The locals avoided it. Children dared each other to throw stones from a safe distance, and tourists flocked to catch a glimpse of the legendary haunted residence. But for law enforcement, it was just another address with a questionable history. I was on duty that evening when the call came in. A frantic voice reported strange screams emanating from the house. Over the years, we'd dispatched officers for various disturbances there. Strange noises, flickering lights, and the occasional sighting of shadows moving against the night. But nothing had ever been substantiated, and the cases were often dismissed as urban legends fueled by overactive imaginations. Dispatch. This is Officer Harris. I'm on my way to 112 Ocean Avenue, I replied, grabbing my jacket and radio. When I arrived, the house loomed like a dark sentinel, its windows reflecting the cold moonlight. Emma, my partner, was already there, her breath visible in the chilly air. Another scream report, she said, her voice tense. No one's been seen in here for years. We approached cautiously, the gravel crunching under our boots. The front door stood ajar, swaying gently as if inviting us in. I pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest, revealing the grand foyer bathed in shadows. Stay sharp, I whispered, drawing my flashlight. We stepped inside, the air heavy with the scent of old wood and something else, something metallic and unsettling. The house was eerily silent, the only sound our footsteps echoing through the vast halls. As we moved deeper, the temperature seemed to drop, our breaths fogging in the beam of our flashlights. The screams had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence that weighed heavily on us. We reached the living room, where the most recent disturbance had been reported. Nothing here, Emma noted, scanning the room. The furniture was covered in white sheets, the remnants of a long-abandoned household. But then, I noticed it, a rocking chair slowly moving back and forth on its own, the rhythmic creaking filling the room. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Emma nodded, her eyes wide with unease. "We need to check upstairs." As we ascended the grand staircase, the air grew colder, each step creaking under our weight. The second floor was a labyrinth of long corridors and closed doors, each one holding its own mystery. We reached the master bedroom, where the screams had originated. The door was closed, but the screams seemed to emanate from within. I pushed it open, flashlight cutting through the darkness. The room was immaculate, untouched by time, yet there was an undeniable presence lurking in the shadows. "Hello," I called out, my voice wavering. No response, but as we stepped further in, the temperature plummeted, our breaths visible in the icy air. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind us, plunging us into darkness. The flashlight flickered and died, leaving us in pitch blackness. "Emma, do you have your phone?" I whispered urgently. She fumbled through her bag, pulling out her phone, the screen eerily lifeless despite being fully charged. Panic set in as we realized we were cut off from the outside world. A faint whisper floated through the room, growing louder with each passing second. "Leave now." I grabbed Emma's arm, pulling her towards the door, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers turned into anguished cries, echoing off the walls, filling the room with a cacophony of despair. "We need to find another way out," I insisted, fumbling in the dark for the door handle. My fingers closed around the cold metal, but it wouldn't budge. Desperation clawed at me as the cries grew louder, more insistent. Suddenly, the room was illuminated by a flash of light, revealing a ghostly figure standing in the corner, a woman with long, flowing hair and eyes that seemed to pierce through my soul. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out, her expression one of endless sorrow and rage. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking. She pointed towards the window, her hand trembling. I followed her gaze and saw that the glass was smeared with dark, bloody streaks that seemed to writhe and move of their own accord. "Help us," Emma whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. The apparition began to fade, her form becoming more translucent with each passing second. "Leave now," her voice echoed in my mind, a haunting plea that reverberated through my very being. The door to the bedroom swung open violently, the oppressive atmosphere lifting slightly as we hurriedly exited. We descended the staircase, the whispers and cries following us, a relentless reminder of the house's tormented past. As we reached the foyer, the front door stood wide open, as if beckoning us to flee. We didn't hesitate, sprinting out into the night, the screams and whispers fading behind us as we made our escape. Once we were safely back at the patrol car, the gravity of what we had experienced began to sink in. Emma and I sat in stunned silence, the events replaying in our minds like a broken record. "We need to report this," I said finally, my voice hollow. The dispatch center received our report with a mix of skepticism and concern. "Are you sure you saw someone?" the dispatcher asked. I nodded, unable to find the words. Something was in the house. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of that night lingered, a dark shadow over our lives. We tried to rationalize the experience, attributing it to the house's notorious reputation and the power of suggestion. But deep down, we knew what we encountered was real, something malevolent that refused to let us forget. I decided to delve deeper into the house's history, seeking answers that could explain the horrors we faced. Old newspapers revealed tales of tragedy, families torn apart by grief, mysterious deaths, and unexplained phenomena that plagued the residents long before the house became a symbol of fear. One name kept appearing in the accounts: Eleanor Whitaker, a woman whose life was shattered by loss and madness. Rumors spoke of her wandering the halls, her spirit unable to find peace, her anguish etched into every creak and whisper of the house. Determined to understand, I reached out to a paranormal investigator who specialized in haunted locations. He agreed to visit Amityville, hoping to shed light on the dark forces that held the house in their grip. When he arrived, his presence seemed to stir the very air around us. We conducted a thorough investigation, documenting every unexplained phenomenon with cameras and recording equipment. The results were chilling, unseen forces manipulating objects, eerie sounds captured on tape, and fleeting glimpses of apparitions that defied explanation. Eleanor's spirit is trapped here, he concluded after reviewing the evidence. Her pain and rage have bound her to this place, fueling the hauntings. Unless her soul can find peace, the house will continue to be a prison for her torment. Armed with this knowledge, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. If we could help Eleanor find peace, perhaps we could finally put an end to the horrors that plagued Amityville. We organized a memorial, gathering the community and those willing to believe in the power of compassion. We offered prayers, shared stories of Eleanor's life, and acknowledged the pain that had kept her spirit bound to the house. As the ceremony concluded, a profound silence enveloped the house. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a serene stillness that spoke of newfound peace. For the first time in decades, the house seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, its dark legacy slowly fading into the night. Emma and I stood together, watching as the first light of dawn broke over Amityville. The haunted house, once a symbol of fear and despair, now stood as a testament to the power of empathy and understanding. We had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, forever changed by the spirits we had encountered. Years have passed since that fateful night, but the memory of Amityville remains a stark reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. I often find myself gazing towards Ocean Avenue, reflecting on the lessons learned and the souls we left behind. The house still stands, no longer a beacon of horror, but a monument to the enduring human spirit and the hope that even in the darkest places, light can find a way to shine through. Whenever a new scream echoes through the night, I remember the faces in the shadows and the tears of a tormented soul seeking peace. It serves as a solemn vow to respect the unseen forces that dwell within our world, and a reminder that sometimes, the scariest stories are those that hold a kernel of truth, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to listen.